Does production against man coverage versus production against zone coverage really matter when it comes to evaluating rookie receiver prospects? We're talking about that in today's video. As always, give us a like and subscribe. We're putting out fantasy and dynasty football content all year long. We're less than 3 weeks away from the NFL draft. For you dynasty players, you're probably about a month or 6 weeks or so away from your dynasty rookie drafts. You're doing your rookie scouting, hopefully. And, we're trying to make that decision. Do I take Malik Nabers or Rome Odunze? Do I take Keon Coleman or Xavier Worthy? And we're trying to find all the numbers that matter and trying to find who's going to be good and who's not. Because honestly, those decisions can make and break your dynasty team. And a notion that I've been hearing going around lately over the last couple years is this idea that receivers in college need to show that they have produced against zone coverage, because that's what the NFL is playing. And the trend that the NFL is going is more and more zone coverage. And honestly, that is true. That part is true. I went back and looked at who was the number one team in terms of man coverage percentage last year in the NFL. It was the Jacksonville Jaguars at 45%. And I saw an article from 2017, which still kind of seems like modern NFL, but it is, 7 years ago now? It is a long time ago, so it shows you how the NFL can change in just a 5 to 7 year span. But anyways, the 45% from the Jags last year in man coverage would have been 9th most in the NFL in 2017. So teams have always, especially over the last 15 years or so, teams have always kind of played zone coverage a majority of the time, but there is a higher rate of zone coverage on average compared to just even 7 years ago in 2017. Once again, the Jags, number one last year in 2023, played 45.1% of their defensive snaps in man coverage. That would have been 9th best in 2017's NFL. So, it is true. Teams are switching to more zone coverage, that too high shell, that cover 4, cover 2 type of defenses. Don't get beat deep. Quarterbacks are too good. Receivers are too fast. We don't want to get beat deep, keep everything underneath us. There is some legs to that. And there is some legs to, potentially receivers needing to be better, or not better, but good against zone coverage when coming out of college. So I went back and looked, as you can see on my screen here, at every receiver since the 2020 draft that was drafted. And I looked at all the ones that hit, no matter where you were drafted. I looked at all the ones that would hit, most of them first, second round picks. But of course, you have guys like Amon-Ra and Puka who were later round picks. All the guys that hit, and I compared their yards per route run against man in college, their last year in college, versus zone yards per route run. And what I found was that the zone coverage yards per route run for receivers that have hit, good receivers in fantasy football, is 3.35. And I believe 10, we have 15 of them here. I believe 10 of the 15 had a yards per route run of 2.9 or better, if you include Jefferson at 2.89, which is, round up to 2.9. So 10 of the 15 had a yards per route run number of 2.9 or better against zone coverage, and the average again comes out to 3.35. Anything above 3 yards per route run is really, really good. When you see players that are good at both man and zone coverage, that's usually a key that they're the elite receivers. A guy like T. Higgins was a first-round pick. Devontae Smith was destroyed man and zone coverage, was a first-round pick. Drake London was a top 10 pick. Garrett Wilson was almost there. He was a top 10 pick. So generally, you do want to see players not just be good at zone. You want to see them good at man, because teams are still running man. But 3.35 zone coverage yards per route run for the receivers that have hit since 2020. I looked at all the receivers that have quote unquote miss. Now, I only looked at the receivers that were drafted in the first or second round, because if you're drafted in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, they're kind of dart throws at that point. You're not really maybe expected to be a stud receiver. Maybe you're drafted for a specific reason. So I only looked at players who were drafted in the first and second round that missed, quote unquote. Jerry Jeudy, maybe you can make an argument he's not a complete bust, but there's a couple guys on here that, like Jahan Dotson. I still have Jameson Williams. There's still some hope for them. For most of the 2023 receivers, I did not include them because I think the jury's still out. We got to at least give 2 years of data before we judge them completely. Maybe you can move Tank Dell to the hit range. I wouldn't argue it. Puka Nacua I put as a hit, though, because he hit his first year. But anyways, receivers that missed, that were kind of busts or just haven't produced for fantasy football, at least. Some of these receivers have their role in an offense, and that's good. But in terms of producing for fantasy football, and sorry, I'm just going to move myself over here and make this a little bigger. The number is lower in yards per route run against zone coverage. Man was about the same, 3.15 yards per route run on average, which is actually more than the receivers that hit. And zone yards per route run does take a significant dip at 2.91. And you can see here, Dwayne Eskridge was at 6.12. So that's actually inflating the number quite a bit. Over half these guys were under I believe 2.5 yards per route run against, maybe 2.9, I forget now, yards per route run against zone. So there is something to this idea that receivers that aren't good in zone coverage generally are not producing or translating as well to the NFL. Now, there's always exceptions. There's never just one. That's why we love football. That's why we love fantasy football. There's never just one thing you can look at to point to or look at and say, oh, this guy's going to be a Hall of Famer and this guy's going to bust. There's just too much. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a perfect example. He's kind of a unicorn in like his analytical stuff, his production, even his raw numbers just weren't that good. But he's obviously one of the best receivers in the NFL, right? So he's kind of an exception to this rule. He was below 2.5. Only two players that have hit since 2020 are below 2.5 yards per route run against zone coverage in their last year in college. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown and George Pickens. And honestly, George Pickens, I know he had 1,100 yards last year. I think he was good for like wide receiver 25 or 6 or something. You can make an argument that he hasn't really hit necessarily. He's been a solid receiver and he's obviously useful, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt. He did have a good year last year. Only two guys though have a yards per route run against zone under 2.5 since 2020 that have hit. Whereas you look at all these first and second round misses, we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 of the 20, I believe I have here. 11 of the 20 receivers that were drafted in the first or second round that were kind of busts had a yards per route run of 2.5 or less than 2.5 against zone. So I do think there's something to that. That's half. That's 50% of them. Now, small sample size for sure. We're only looking at 15 receivers here. This is only since 2020. And the reason I chose 2020 is that's kind of when I started hearing about this philosophy change of defenses playing more cover 2, cover 4 shell zone defenses. That's why I've gone since 2020. So I do think there's something to it that we generally want to see guys, be good in both. But if we had to choose one, we want to see a guy produce in zone. And in college football, really produce in zone, not be bad against zone coverage. Because if you're bad against zone coverage in college, there's a good chance you're going to be bad against zone coverage in the NFL. So that takes us to the last part of this video. That is receivers in the 2024 draft class that have plus zone coverage yards per route run. So in green here, we have the guys that are 3 or higher: Marvin Harrison, Malik Nabers, Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey, and Devontae Walker, as well as Jermaine Burton and Malik Washington, all have over 3 yards per route run against zone coverage. The guys in yellow are all guys above 2.5. Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas, Leggett. You can see the number, the names here, and then all the guys in orange are all 2.5 or below. So guys like Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell, these are big name prospects that are potential first-round picks in the NFL draft, first-round picks in your dynasty rookie drafts. I'm not saying it's the be-all, end-all. I'm not saying they can't be successful, but the data is kind of pointing towards you want to be, have a pretty good yards per route run against zone. And yards per route run, I should have answered this or talked about this in the beginning, is a pretty good metric in terms of translating to success in production. So Keon Coleman, 1.65, Adonai Mitchell 1.75. It's a little bit of a red flag, I would say. Other guys, Xavier Worthy, who I'm a big fan of, Jalen Polk, these guys are probably second-round picks, all under that 2.5 threshold. So, again, we do like to see guys, we see Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors are good and, dominant in both. Rome Odunze's kind of dominant in both. Troy Franklin's dominant in both. We do like to see those type of numbers. So that's kind of all I have for you guys. Again, this isn't the be-all, end-all. Obviously, if you look at this list of misses, look at some of these guys that were dominant in their last year in college against zone. Jerry Jeudy, Chase Claypool had a pretty high number. Rashad Bateman and Elijah Moore had really high numbers, right? Jameson Williams, Jahan Dotson, Wan'Dale Robinson. There's guys that are really good against zone in yards per route run in college, and they bust too. So it's not the be-all, end-all, but it could be a tiebreaker for you. It could give you add to the formula, right? Take everything you can in. Take the analytics, take the film, watch the film, go with the players you like. And if you need to, maybe you can use this production against zone versus man as a tiebreaker if you're coming down, you're drafting a receiver in your second round of your rookie draft. So that's all I have for you guys today. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Just trying to give you as much information to make you most successful in your dynasty rookie draft. So I'll be interested to kind of follow this along and look at guys like Troy Franklin versus Keon Coleman, right? A guy who's really good in zone in college versus a guy who wasn't very good in zone in college, and who is more productive. As always, like and subscribe, and we will catch you guys all next time.